Good morning, everyone, and shalom. And I'm back this week. I was on vacation last week. I had spent some good time with family. I hadn't seen my father in a while, and that was a great time. Yeah. Well, today we're covering question 48 from the Catechism. Does Adam's sin have on an effect on you? That's the way it was worded in the Catechism. I'm not sure if that's a typo in the book, but anyway, the answer is yes. We were born into sin, which causes death. Scripture is Romans chapter 5, verse 12. Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. Romans 5:12. And of course, I always make it a point to remind everyone, we're using the Young Baptist Catechism, a beginner's guide to the Baptist Confession of Faith of 1689 by Adam MURRELL. It is on sale right now. The paperback for $7 and $2.99 on Kindle. And it's a good catechism. That's why we're using it, right? Well, anyway, several years ago when I think I was probably a sophomore or a junior in high school. This was back in the 90s, so for those of us who are older. I remember I was having a conversation with a man. He was a little bit older than me, maybe 2, 3, 4 years older than me, and we were talking about the gospel. Now, at this time, I was still trying to learn about doctrine and theology, but I've never had any formal training in this area, so I'm more like self-taught. I listen to things and I read things. So when I was having a conversation with this gentleman, one of the things that came up was what our abilities are as human beings to do what is right. And he was under the impression that it was possible for men to live righteous lives. And I said to him, actually, the Bible says that no one is perfect, that no one actually has the capacity to do that. And he was shocked to hear this. And I remember him saying, you know what? It's best that you probably not tell people that. Nice guy, though. Don't get me wrong. He's a nice guy. And as I got older and I started looking into the history of this doctrine, how many people here, I know it's a little early, some of the members have not arrived yet, but how many people here have heard of a man by the name of Pelagius? Raise your hand. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 fans. 1, 2, 3, 4 hands. Okay. Well, Pelagius was a man who lived in the late 4th century, early 5th century. I can't remember the exact dates. And one of the things that he was concerned about was that there were Christians, professing Christians, who were lazy about living the Christian life. They were making excuses, well, I can't do this or I can't do that. And he was saying, no, and they would talk about the fall of Adam. And he would say, yes, Adam did fall, but the thing is, we also are like Adam. We also have the ability to make choices just like Adam did. And so we shouldn't be lazy in our Christian walk, and we should try as much as we can to live a life that is righteous and pure. Well, there was another individual, a bishop in the Church of North Africa. His name was Augustine. And Augustine had written a prayer in which he said, Lord, command what you will and grant me what you will for me to do. In other words, he was saying, God, command me to do anything you want me to do, but then grant me the will to do it. Pelagius didn't like this. Pelagius had a serious problem with Augustine saying this. He was saying, no, God doesn't need to grant us the will to do his will. We have the ability to do so. And this became a huge controversy on the doctrine of original sin that Augustine was at the forefront on. There were other fathers, but when you talk about the doctrine of original sin, Augustine's name, I think he's the one that coined the phrase, or at least one of the first. But if you look up, you can go on Google and just put original sin, and in there you will hear Augustine's name in a number of different articles, because he was the champion of the doctrine of original sin, explaining the sinful depravity of man. So let me quote a few verses. Now, some of the questions that we're dealing with here are overlapping with one another, because I've already talked about original sin in some of the other Sunday schools, as has Deacon James. And Deacon James, next week, Deacon James, the next question is going to deal with the doctrine of federalism and imputation. So I will not be discussing federalism or imputation in this particular Sunday school. So there's a bit of an overlap, so we're going to overlap some verses again. So let me read some. This is from Genesis 2:16 through 17. The Lord God commanded the man, saying, from any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat from it, you will surely die. This is what God commanded Adam. Now, after the fall, we inherited, Adam said, this is me writing, by the way. After the fall, we inherited Adam's sinful nature, which resulted in the collective death of humanity. God said, in the day that you eat from it, you will surely die. But did Adam and Eve die physically the day they fell? No. Adam went on to live 930 years until his death in Genesis 5:5. Before the fall, man was in full communion with God. After the fall, man was separated from God. This is spiritual death. Before the fall, we had the capacity of living sinless lives or to choose to rebel against God. After the fall, we became incapable of living sinless lives. Now, Augustine actually had Latin. Of course, Augustine was a bishop in the church from the 4th century, and he died around the year 430. And so he was a Latin-speaking church father. And so he would talk about what he called the posse pecarum and the posse non pecarum. And what that meant was that when we were in the garden, or let me rephrase, when Adam was in the garden, he had the ability to live a sinless life, and he also had the ability to fall into sin. Those are two choices that Adam had in the garden. But after the fall, he brings sin into the world, as is quoted in Romans 5:12, as we just quoted right now. And so, as a result, we lose the ability to live the sinless life. So now we are living with the struggle. So I wanted to quote here from Ken Samples. He says, as humans, we like to think that we are masters of our own fate. We especially enjoy thinking that we are autonomous individuals whose personal decisions have made us who we are in life. Philosophers even talk about libertarian free will, defined as the view that an individual who freely made a specific choice could have decided differently. But are we really captains of our own ships? And this is from his book, Christianity Cross-Examined, Kenneth Richard Samples. So he shows us here that we don't have autonomy. Now, even in the garden, Adam wasn't really autonomous, because no one is actually free from God. If you define free will or freedom as freedom from God, no one is free from God. So no one has free will, no one has freedom. But we do have certain forms of freedom. I usually define the term freedom as free from coercion. But there are different kinds of freedom. You have libertarian freedom, autonomous freedom, etc., etc. But here's where we deal with the fall. Now, I remember I mentioned before, and I think I quoted this in the previous Sunday school, the concept of the two impulses that were taught among the ancient Jews. I assume that the Jews still have this concept to this day, correct, brother? Eric? Yeah, okay. I think they do, but I know that this is and I'm quoting here from Every Man's Talmud, page 144 in the Kindle version. He says, the two impulses. Mention is made of the evil impulses as a force which drives to wickedness, and as an endowment of man which proves a formidable obstacle in the way to a righteous life. It is described as the leaven in the dough, the fermenting ingredient that stirs up evil elements in man's nature, which, unless suppressed, overrule the finer instincts and result in wicked actions. So here we have a concept. Now, if you ask the question, do the Jews believe in the doctrine of original sin? The answer that they will give is no. But I believe that this at least indicates that they have an understanding of it, maybe not fully fleshed out the way we Christians have. Yes, brother?
Before the fall,
Mm-hmm.
Adam didn't even know what sin was.
Mm-hmm.
Or is that wrong?
Well, that depends on what you mean by sin, because he was told.
He had two choices:
Yes.
to live a sinless life or to sin.
Right.
But doesn't the context kind of indicate that he didn't even know what sin was?
Well, that depends on what.
Who told you you were naked?
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, in the garden, and like I said, Deacon James is going to deal with the federal headship issue and imputation. But in the garden, we understand that there was a covenant that God made with Adam. And it is usually referred to as the Edenic covenant or Adamic covenant, and usually it's referred to as the covenant of works. And in that covenant, he was told not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And when he and Eve ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he was committing a sin. So there was a knowledge of sin. Now the question about when it says, did Adam know what sin was prior to the fall in terms of what we know of today? Many theologians believe, and there's a controversy. You can read systematic theologies that will give you the different theories, and then they'll give you their particular point of view. One of the theories that's very common, especially among reformers, is that it means that they did not know sin experientially. Okay? But one of the issues that is very important to understand is that the Bible says that God created man in the image of God. Now, the sin of Adam, the transgression, actually resulted in not an annihilation or a removal of the image of God, but we now, it's a fractured, it's a tarnished image of God. So now we know sin experientially, and now we don't have the righteousness. The idea is that in the garden, he was righteous. And so now how do you measure righteousness? You measure righteousness by conformity to law. And what is the law, as we understand it? The law is a reflection of the character of God. And Adam, as I just wrote, was in full communion with God. So as someone who was in full communion with God, he had perfect righteousness and had not experienced sin. But he knew that he was not to break the law, because in the word, it said the word sin means transgression of law. And so in the garden, he's told, you may eat of all of the trees in the garden except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. So they eat of the fruit, they are kicked out of the garden. So they had committed sin. So there was a knowledge of sin. Now, did they have a fully fleshed out understanding about murder and all the 10 Commandments the way that we understand it in their experience? Probably not. But some people have speculated, and I think I don't take that very seriously personally, that in the garden, Adam and Eve were like little children that, Adam might slap Eve and he wouldn't know that was wrong. I don't buy it. But I don't know if that answers your question or... Yeah, okay. Okay, good. All right, so here's another Bible verse. We're conceived in sin. Be gracious to me, O Lord, according to your loving kindness, according to the greatness of your compassion. Blot out my transgressions, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I know that my transgressions and my sin is ever before me against you. But only I have sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified when you speak and blameless when you judge. Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. And I remember I had spoken with a pastor from a previous church, because he knew some Hebrew. I don't know if he was a Hebrew scholar, but he knew some Hebrew. And he told me that the word for being conceived in sin in the Hebrew meant corruption. So personally, I don't understand why Jews don't have a doctrine of original sin, because I think Psalm 51 is very clear on this. So it goes on. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. And I headed it, evil intent in the heart of man. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Genesis 6:5. The Lord smelled the soothing aroma, and the Lord said to himself, I will never again curse the ground on account of man, for the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth, and I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. Genesis 8:21. This is after the fall, after the flood. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, slanders. Matthew chapter 15, verse 19. And this is a very important passage because I mentioned a moment ago about the two impulses within man. And notice how this is not just part of the Jewish understanding in the Talmud, but it's also in the New Testament. Keep watching and praying that you may not enter into temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Two impulses, right? For what I am doing, I do not understand, for I am not practicing what I would like to do, but I am doing the very thing that I hate. But if I do the very thing I do not want to do, I agree with the law, confessing that the law is good. So now no longer am I the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. For I know that the nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh, for the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. For the good that I want, I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. But if I am doing the very thing I do not want, I am no longer the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. I find then the principle that evil is present in the one who wants to do good, for I joyfully concur with the law of God in the inner man, but I see a different law in the members of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin which is in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will set me free from the body of this death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, on the one hand, I myself with my mind am serving the law of God, but on the other hand, with my flesh, the law of sin. Two impulses. Now bear in mind, in the garden, there were no two impulses. There was nothing pulling us in the direction of sin. That was simply an enticement of the mind. Satan is coming into the garden and he says, God's lying to you. If you take of that garden, you're going to have the whole enchilada. You're going to get everything you want. And it was a lie, right? Now we talk about the curse. Now I did manage to listen to the Sunday school that Deacon James gave last week, and he was asking about my view regarding physical death, regarding the fall. So he'll probably catch this at a later time. But I believe my view is the same as Brother Eric's, if I'm correct on this. So when Adam and Eve fell in the garden, now we've already talked about the effect of sin. Now, but in Romans 5:12, it says that sin results in death. So there's two separate things that are happening: sin and then death. But as I said before, let me look at the time here. Okay, so as I said before, death, when it says, on the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Well, I've already established they didn't actually physically die in the garden, right? They didn't die. Now, I have read that there are some people that speculate that the translation that says, the day you eat of it shall surely die, it actually could also be translated that the day you eat of it, your death is certain. I don't buy that translation. I think that the more simple one is that the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but there wouldn't have been a reason to write that if that would have been the meaning, in my opinion. So the issue here is that it says that they were going to die on that day. Now, if they didn't die physically, in what way did they die? They died spiritually. So then, what does this say about their physical body? Well, there are two basic theories that exist. Some believe that before the fall, Adam had an immortal body. So let's pretend we have a time machine, we go back in time, and we decide to grab a sword and try to run it through Adam. Would he die? Would the sword pierce his skin? If you believe he was immortal, then that means that the sword would not be able to kill him. If you believe he was mortal, then he would be theoretically capable of dying. So how would we understand the issue of the death, the physical death? The answer is that there are two different theories. One is, of course, that he was immortal and he couldn't have died, and the other was that he was mortal. So how does the penalty of death affect Adam in this situation? Well, one of the trees that was in the garden was it was the tree of life. And so and this is, by the way, the belief of the ancient Jews. The ancient Jews believed that Adam was mortal in the garden, right? And they believe that Adam could have lived had he continued to feed from that tree. Now, I'm not very forceful about this particular opinion, but I think it makes a lot of sense. Yes, brother.
I think there's an indication that would be the case because of the fact that in the book of Revelation, you have against an allusion being made to the tree of life.
Right.
So that if life is being given in eternity, then to me it seems to imply that life would have continued if they would have kept eating of the tree. And then I'll modify a little bit the view because I think James has a little bit more the view that I have, which is that when they committed sin, they did die obviously spiritually.
Yes.
But I do believe in essence the death sentence was incurred.
Yes.
So in other words, in essence the law eventually became in. Because the Bible also speaks about, the creation groaning to be redeemed. So that in essence everything began to die at that point.
Right. I mean, this also has to do with how you view the age of the universe as well. So, because then you have the question of, was there death before, physical death, biological death before the fall outside the garden? And so you have the old earth and the new earth, and that we can leave that for that discussion. But regarding the issue of Adam specifically, so where do I get the idea of physical death coming in? Well, my view is that, and this is the same view, by the way, of Dr. Robert Morey, and there are other systematic theologians that do believe that, is that because they were dependent upon the tree of life to remain alive, once they were kicked out of the garden, the book of Genesis says that the tree of life was taken away from them. So therefore, once the tree of life is taken away from them, they no longer are able to feed in order to stay alive in an immortal state. And so he wouldn't have died at the age of 930. Now, why would I believe that the physical death is a separate thing? Well, because I said before, you have sin, which results in death, and death results in the curses. So what is it? What are the curses that are given? I'm going to skip over the serpent. If you look, for example, for the woman, we are told that she would have pain in childbirth. That's one of the curses. Second, the battle of the sexes. We are told from the passage that, and let me see this right here. Curse. Okay, so let me read the curses first. The woman, he said, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children, yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Then Adam, he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you will eat of it, and the days of your life, both thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So let me list the curses as I numbered them down. For the woman, number 1, it is pain in childbirth. Number 2 is the battle of the sexes. And I wanted to add a quote here from Paul Washer. Quote, the relationship between men and women would be marked by conflict. The woman would desire to dominate her husband, and her husband would exert his rule over her. The Truth About Man, 276 in the Kindle version. Does anyone need proof that this is true? Okay, I'll skip over the answer. All right. For man, the ground was cursed, number 1. Number 2, he was to labor for food. And number 3 was physical death. Now, one of the issues that I found, 3 is the most important part for this particular point, is because in my own journey, when I was having conversations with full preterists, as did Brother Eric, is that full preterists argue that the resurrection of the dead in 1 Corinthians 15 is spiritual, not physical. And they base it on the idea that in the fall, in Genesis chapter 3, they died spiritually. And so if they died spiritually, therefore they must rise spiritually. And what I had told them is, well, number 1, the reversal of spiritual death is being born again. Regeneration is the opposite of that. I remember when I was a little boy, my uncle used to say to me, if you're born once, you die twice. If you're born twice, you die once. Right? So if you are born spiritually, which is the second birth, that means you will only die once and you will live forever with God in the resurrection. But if you only live once, if you only are born once, which is physically, and you're dead spiritually, you will die twice. You'll have physical death, and then you have death in the second death, which is the lake of fire, recorded in Revelation chapter 20, which is also referred to as Gehenna in the Gospels by Jesus Christ himself. So what I pointed out is that if you look at Genesis chapter 3, physical death is part of the curse. So first you have sin, which causes death, spiritual death, and death results in the curses that I am describing in this particular passage. So as we're getting into these issues, we are seeing, now if anyone disagrees with what I'm saying, that's okay. In fact, if you have any questions or comments, I welcome them right now, if anyone disagrees. Brother Eric?
Yeah, I don't really have a disagreement. The only question I would have to nuance your view.
Mm-hmm.
And, so for instance, the resurrection, because to me, when I look at the resurrection, it's a redemptive act.
Yes.
So that means that's one of the reasons why I believe, for instance, that when Adam and Eve sinned, that death had to be an element of that, because the resurrection is in essence a reversal of that as well.
Right. Right, but and of course when we did Christian Thought in Our World, the episode, one of the points that I made, and I forgot to bring the verse, have the verse ready to discuss it, so I apologize for that. But one of the points that I made is that in 1 Corinthians 15 it says, the first man was made earthy, the second man is made heavenly, but first comes the earthy. And so if you look in 1 Corinthians 15, you have a parallelism, what is referred to as Hebrew parallelism. You have the mortal, immortal, spiritual, heavenly, earthly, corruptible, incorruptible, strong, weak, etc., etc. So you have this Hebrew parallelism that is presented. And Paul makes it a point to say that the mortal came first. And so So the problem for me, and I used to be on the other side of this, and this is a very small. We're splitting a little bit of a hair. It's not that big of a deal, but it will affect how you answer. Like if you believe that you were spiritual, that their body became physically mortal the moment they ate the fruit, that will affect how you have a conversation, an apologetic or evangelistic conversation with someone like a full preterist. But when you're looking at this issue of the reversal, when I look at this, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of life was a physical tree. And many people would believe that the tree of life in the book of Revelation is actually Jesus, at least in some sense. Sister, did you have a question or comment? Or? Oh, okay. I thought I heard you say it. Anyone else have any comments?
Real quick.
Yes.
Describe what's a preterist partial hope.
Oh, okay. Yes. So I don't know if we'll ever cover this in the Sunday schools, but there is a view of end times known as preterism, and it comes from a Latin word, I think it's praeteritus or something like that, and it means fulfilled in the past. And so if you believe that prophecy's been fulfilled, you are a preterist. Now, so for example, if we had a Jewish rabbi here who is still waiting for the Messiah, we're preterists to him, because we believe the Messiah has already arrived. But when it comes to Bible prophecy specifically, there are these views about preterism that exist about the book of Revelation. There are beliefs, and people that hold to the partial preterist view, like myself. I'm not sure if Eric still holds that view anymore. But do you still hold that view, or are you?
I think I'm in the midst of a transition.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, he used to hold that view. But so anyway, the partial preterist view is held by people like Gary DeMar, the late Dr. R.C. Sproul, Ken Gentry, the late Greg Bonson. There's a number of people that hold the partial preterist view, but it's still a minority view. They believe, and we believe, that most of the prophecies of the book of Revelation have already been fulfilled. We're still waiting for the second coming. We're still waiting for the resurrection. We're still waiting for the great white throne judgment and the new heavens and new earth. We're still waiting for that. The full preterists, they believe all Bible prophecy has been fulfilled. The resurrection is past. It's only spiritual, not physical. They believe that they believe it's all done. There's no more Satan, no more demons, no more lake of fire. That's all done. So this would be considered a heresy. So when you're dealing with full preterists, certain questions will come up, and it will relate to the fall. So they're going to bring you back to Genesis chapter 3, and they're going to challenge you on this. And so what your understanding of this will affect how you have this conversation. But of course, they're also a mixed bag because they have a number of disagreements among themselves. But, excuse me. So when you're talking about, so let me go back to the issue of sin for a moment, because one of the things I remember listening to, because I like listening to Dr. R.C. Sproul, the late Dr. R.C. Sproul. He was talking about how many theologians talk about sin in reference to what is called civil virtue. In this particular case, what you have are people who do the right thing but for the wrong reasons. And now when it comes to like government policy, like civil laws, you want to incentivize people to do the right thing, to follow the laws, even if they do it for less than virtuous reasons. You know, of course, you have politicians who will try to parade themselves on television and radio and websites, YouTube videos where they try to promote, look at all the wonderful things I'm doing, you know, but they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it for public relations. And so in one sense, that's a good thing because people are getting help. Even if the motivations of the helper are bad, people are still getting helped. So we want to incentivize good behavior even if the motivations are bad in civil law. But we don't want that in church. In the church, we want people to do good things out of a good motivation, out of a desire to love God. And unfortunately, we have people that have fortunately, we have people that have civil virtue in terms of how we live in our daily lives in, as a civilization. But in the church, we have a lot of people who are basically, hypocrites. And they are just living this life, they're pretending, and it's all for show. And so we want to make that distinction. But because of the fall. Now, if we didn't have the fall, then we'd have a different situation. Because one of the issues that is not part of, but I'm just briefly mentioning that, is that when we get to the eternal state, so this is post-resurrection, we're in glory, this is where this is where the culmination of our salvation, because salvation is actually a process. Salvation begins before the foundation of the world. We are predestined unto salvation, and that begins it. Then when we're born in sin, we're born children of wrath, we're sinners, and we're not sinners because we sinned. We are natural born sinners. We actually commit actual sins because of original sin. And one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand is that original sin is not what Adam did in the garden. Adam's sin is what gave us original sin. The original sin is what happens to us as a result of the fall. And then once we receive that fall, we commit actual sin. Yes, brother.
That's actually one of the things that puzzles me about the Jews, because you see that as a reaction of what Adam and Eve did, there was an effect on the earth. So how could they deny, in essence, original sin? Because the whole concept of original sin is that the reason why the world is the way it is because of Adam and Eve's action.
They have a concept of the evil impulse as being part of our creation. And so when they look at the evil impulse, they see that as taking effect, that they would have arguments amongst themselves. If you read Abraham Cohen's book, Every Man's Talmud, he talks about how there were Jews that would argue, do they have the evil impulse when they're still in their mother's womb? And which part of the body is it? And then there were others saying, no, it's when they come out of the mother's womb. That's when they get the evil impulse. And then the positive impulse, they would say that would come in, I think, at the age of 12 or something like that. So they have these things, but they recognize that there is this evil inclination, but they believe it's something that happens to you. They don't see the federal headship of Adam. And I'm not going to get into that because James is going to talk about this next Sunday. But the issue that we're getting into is simply that as Christians, we recognize that in the eternal state, once we have the culmination of our salvation. So what I was saying, I'm sorry, before I got sidetracked on this, I was saying it begins with predestination, then we are born into sin. But if you are a person, a member of the elect, basically, you are called, you are regenerated, you come to faith in Jesus Christ, and when you come to faith in Jesus Christ, you are justified. And as you are justified, you are beginning the process of sanctification. This is where you're being purified. And then the culmination, the finished work of that sanctification is when you rise from the dead. And when you rise from the dead and you're in the eternal state and you're in glory, you now become incapable of sinning. This is different from before the fall. Before the fall, we were capable of doing sin, and we were capable of not doing sin, or to live righteous. In the eternal state, we become incapable of sinning. We become purely righteous. It's a beautiful thing, because there would be evil would be done away with. Yes, sister?
If God created all things, where did evil come from?
That's a tough one, because the question is, like, there's the different perspectives, and I'm actually not decided on this, and we actually talked about this on the show. Some people believe, I've heard Hank Hanegraaff say, that God creates the potential for evil and that man actualizes it. But in the sense, it would have to be, Satan would have had to be the first one to do it. Now, the other view that is out there, some people call evil the absence of good. Now, one of the things that I'm concerned about, and I listened to a lecture by R.C. Sproul, and I recommend anyone to listen. I just put R.C. Sproul and The Origin of Evil on YouTube, and you'll see a sermon that he preached on it. And what he talks about is, what does evil actually exist as like an entity? In other words, if I say, brother, would you give me a glass of water? You can grab a glass and pour water in it and drink it. But if I say, could you give me a cup of evil, that it's not something that you can hold in your hand or pour it. So what is it exactly? If you say that evil is eternal with God, then you're engaging in some sort of dualism. So the idea that I'm kind of flirting with, bless you, is that evil doesn't exist as an abstract entity, like something that it's like this force, like, how in Star Wars you have the force and then you have the dark side, the light side and the dark side. I don't believe in that personally, but I might change my mind, so you might hear me say something different. I believe that evil is a verb. It's something that you do. So God is holy, he is eternal, he is the creator of the heavens and the earth, and he is righteousness, and he does not conform. So when you look at God, imagine the figure of God like a manifestation of God. God is righteous, not because there is some external standard, like let's say that this symbolizes the law of God. And we can say, well, we know that God is righteous because he conforms to this law. No, God is the law. The law, when God gives us this, he is revealing his own character. And so evil or sin is whatever opposes him. So if you decide, I'm going to oppose God's law, that's what evil is. But it's not like an entity. So I remember, and I'm about to end this, but I remember when I was at Trinity Reformed Baptist Church in La Mirada, I heard Rob Zins preach a sermon. And he was talking about the origin of evil, the question that you just asked. And they said, well, if you're asking where does evil come from, how did Satan become evil? He says, because he sure didn't get it from his environment. Right? He was in the presence of God and the angels. He wasn't in the presence of sinners, but yet he fell into that sin. And so then you have the aspect of how God uses evil, because the evil things that happen in the world are decreed by God. He is the first cause of all evil events, and we are the secondary causes. This is in the confession, and you find numerous passages in both the Old and New Testament where there are so many things. I actually did on my show, Scripture Talk Live, I did a whole show just on the sovereignty of God, and I talk about how God is involved even in the evil. I don't know if that helps with the answer, but it's a question of how you view, if you view evil as some sort of abstract entity. Yes, sister?
So the problem of evil, right? Why
Yes.
does it exist?
Yeah.
I think that's more the question, or am I?
No, she said, what is the origin of evil?
Where it came
Yeah.
from. If God can't sin, right? How did he make it? Right. I think he allowed evil for his glory. So you look at and see, like, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. Why? To make his name famous.
Mhm.
So it's all part of his plan to glorify himself. That's how I look at it.
Right,
Maybe
but
I'm wrong.
yeah, no, it's not that. I mean, I believe that God decrees. It's all part of his plan. But the question is evil something like a force that exists, and then people are seduced by the dark side, shall we say? Or is it just an action that we do. Yes, brother.
Or is it in essence a principle, and Satan would be, for instance, an incarnation of that? Because all the elements of evil are supposed to be within Satan, right?
Yes, but it's not like evil was shoved into him, because he was in heaven. So there was nothing in him that was pure. It was found in him. We know it was decreed that it was going to happen. But what I'm saying is it's an action. It's not, I don't believe it's a force. Now, if anyone disagrees with me, that's okay. But I don't believe that sister, if I can answer it this way, I don't believe that evil is a substance that was created at a certain point in time. I believe that evil, yes, evil is just something that is done. It's not a substance. I don't know if that answers your question or if that leaves you more confused. But that's the best I can do on that. But I guess I can end it right there. Heavenly Father, thank you for letting us discuss these issues that are so important, because we want to learn and understand. And these questions come up in conversations, both with children and also with people that are asking questions about our faith and want to know about the hereafter and want to know what this is all supposed to be about, Father. We want to quench these curiosities, these questions, and we ask you, James 1:5 says to pray, to ask for wisdom, because you give it to us so generously and mercifully, and we just ask you to give us this wisdom so that we may be greater servants of you. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, amen.